Order. Order. À l'ordre. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Politics in the Pen 2020. That wasn't so hard. I don't know what the other speakers were complaining about.
Remember a time when we could gather together in groups, in really, really big groups? Remember when all of our social bubbles came in a glass? While the pandemic means that we can't get together this year in person, it certainly doesn't mean that we can't celebrate. So, straighten your bow tie, adjust your tiara, and make a toast to the most popular political party in Ottawa. Politics in the Pen isn't just an annual gala, it's a day-long event. The organizing committee is up early, fielding last-minute pleas for tickets that are almost impossible to get. The chefs at the Chateau Laurier are busy putting the finishing touches on a deliciously Canadian meal. Hard-working dry cleaners and hairstylists work overtime trying to make reporters presentable. And politicians could very well be voting in their tuxedos and gowns so they don't miss a moment of the excitement. Now, when you cram 500 interesting people into a ballroom, you never know how the night will begin, or more importantly, how it will end. But it's an evening where politics truly does collide with the pen. It includes the journalists you wake up early to read, and those you stay up late to watch on the nightly news. Every table includes a leading Canadian author, writers who can turn a political success or misstep into a 300-page thriller. And then there are the politicians. Now, maybe it's the company or perhaps more likely the cocktails, but for one night at least, all partisanship is put aside to celebrate Canadian political writing. There are plenty of fundraisers in Ottawa, but there's really something quite special about Politics in the Pen. It puts the fun into fundraising and the noise in, well, noisy. The only people who don't have a good time are the poor bagpiper trying to herd folks into the ballroom and those charged with trying to get us all to sit down.
Heather Bradley, order. Don Newman, please take your seat. Susan Delacour, come to order. Carolyn Bennett, order. Carolyn Bennett. Would the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources take his seat? Would His Excellency, the U.S. Ambassador, take his seat, please? Karina Gould, take your seat. Mélanie Joly, prenez votre siège, madame. Kevin Bosch, Will Amos, sit down, please. François-Philippe Champagne, asseyez-vous, monsieur. Bruce Heyman, sit down, sir.
What usually works is the entertainment. Politicians and other public figures like O'Regan, Carney, Leslie, Bryson, and O'Toole doing their level best impersonations of stand-up comedians. The humor is self-deprecating, irreverent, and always, well, usually funny.
I've got all my life to live. I've got big speeches to give, and I will survive.
Bring me my banjo.
But the real reason we're all there is to award the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing. It was established 20 years ago to honor its namesake, the outspoken and popular MP from Windsor, Ontario, Shaughnessy Cohen. This $25,000 literary award recognizes the continued relevance of political nonfiction to this country's public policy discussion.
So, the winner of the 2013 Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing, the longer I'm Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, Paul Wells,
Joseph Heath, Enlightenment 2.0, restoring sanity to our politics, our economy, and our lives.
John Ibbitson for Stephen Harper.
Is Kamal Al-Salali.
Kenneth Talaga for 7 Fallen Feathers. Rachel Geese for boys.
Today, when we were in the Speaker's office, we all had the opportunity to sign our books. And I looked up for a moment and took it all in and just thought, you know, when you spend 4 years writing at your kitchen table in sweatpants, you never imagine that you'll find yourself here. This is extraordinary. Thank you so much.
The prize, as well as Politics in the Pen itself, demonstrates the power of the written word to spark discussion, debate, and ultimately change. It also highlights the important work of the Writers' Trust. Founded in 1976, the mission of the Writers' Trust is to advance, nurture, and celebrate Canadian writers so that our country's voices are heard from coast to coast to coast and even beyond that. Financial support from the Trust gives authors the time to finish a book, to promote their work, or simply to deal with unforeseen circumstances. As you can imagine, it's been an essential lifeline for so many during COVID-19. That's why events like this are so vital. Politics in the Pen alone has raised over $4.5 million for writers across Canada, and it is why there was so much worry when the pandemic forced us to postpone this gala back in May. Fortunately, though, our dedicated long-term sponsors immediately stepped in to help. So a big thank you to our leading supporters: CN, CIBC, Imperial, Shaw, and our media sponsor, The Hill Times. Thanks also to all the corporations and associations that you see now on your screen. Their generous donations will ensure that Canadian writing continues to thrive for the benefit of everybody. And now, without further ado, let's get down to the business of awarding the 2020 Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing. Thanks to our friends at Shaw, here are your 5 finalists.
Adam Chapnick's book fascinated me because it was such a dark horse. But it's about how Canada gets onto the United Nations Security Council, which might sound really dry and academic, but Adam Chapnick dishes the dirt, and I was really gripped. It was funny, and it really also then lays out what are the stakes. Why would Canada, as a middle power, want to be on the Security Council? What's at stake when we make one of these bids, and what happens when we fail?
It is a very interesting piece of history, and it is a unique book. There is nothing else that has been written quite like it. It is very comprehensive, it's engaging, there's full of kind of juicy behind-the-scenes gossip.
Pursuing a seat on the Security Council isn't about changing the world. It's really about access to the most powerful countries in the world for a 2-year period that you wouldn't get otherwise. If only 10 countries in the world have that regular access to the US, the UK, France, China, and Russia, it means that most of the rest of the international community wants to be our best friend.
The fact that we didn't get onto the Security Council this time is all the more reason that we need to read this book to understand what is the value, if any, in being on the Security Council for Canada in 2020. And it's a really good way for us to think, all right, we didn't succeed this time. What are the clues in this book that might lead us to understand the nature of that failure and whether or not it's of consequence to Canada today? What Harold Johnson manages to do, and it's really an extraordinary work of alchemy, is to take very personal, heartfelt anecdotes, stories of his childhood, stories of his experiences at law school, stories of his experiences in courtrooms as both a prosecutor and a defense counsel, and combine them with an intellectual analysis of the Constitution and of the criminal code.
It is basically the story of how Indigenous peoples have interacted with the law, how the law has failed them, how treaties have failed them, but it is a deeply, deeply personal book. It is an emotional book, and he describes how the law and the system have hurt them and have hurt community members more than, the wrong that the justice system has sought to fix.
It was my experience in the justice system, my frustrations with it, my inability to make change, my loss of innocence. I'd once believed that I was doing good and came to the realization that I wasn't, that I was making my communities worse. I wasn't helping. That's the book. It's my apology for what I did.
It is a cri de coeur. It is a cry from the heart, but it's also an appeal to the intellect. It demands of us to ask why our criminal justice system is so dysfunctional, not just for Indigenous people, but for all Canadians. And what are the lessons we need to learn to have a system of justice that is fair for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and in fact, better for all of Canada. In this book, the story is pretty dark and pretty grim, but I think it does end on a note of hope because it calls us to action. And I think a call to action is always a note of hope rather than saying that there is nothing to be done. There is something to be done, and Harold Johnson asks us to get to work to do it.
This book is more of a mental reminder that you are not dealing with a country that behaves according to the norms that you are used to, and that your approach needs to be fine-tuned and sophisticated and less naive than it perhaps has been.
One of the real strengths of Claws of the Panda is that it is the history of Canada's relationships with China. So it's not just looking at our relationship, our troubled relationship with China in the here and now. It's a really fascinating look at the long roots of Canada's close and complex relationship with China.
This was not an easy book to write, as you can imagine. And I decided from very early on to work exclusively from the public record. It's not a rant or a diatribe. It is simply an account of what is on the public record.
Canada's relationship with China is particularly fraught. And so this is a time when a lot of people in Canada are very leery about our relationship with China going forward.
The only relationship we share with China is one of trade. We have no shared civic values or diplomatic values or strategic or security values. It's simply trade, and that means that when you have a crisis becomes a major crisis very, very quickly.
What Jonathan Manthorpe brings to the table is a lifetime of experience as a journalist. I mean, he has a deep expertise in the China file, but more than that, he has a deep expertise in figuring out how to explain complex subjects to lay readers. And what makes The Claws of the Panda a cracking good read is that Jonathan Manthorpe is a cracking good writer. There has never been a Supreme Court justice who has written a book like this. The first thing I found so remarkable was the candor and the frankness with which she wrote about her own life and what it meant to be a feminist, what it meant to be a woman in a man's world, but then also this look at the way her life experiences shaped her approach to the law and her shape to the interpretation of the Constitution.
My career as a judge paralleled the arc of the Charter. The Charter came into place in 1982, and I was named a county court judge in 1981. So I lived through all those momentous developments in rights and freedoms and how the Charter provisions would be interpreted. And these were developments that led to things like ultimately the recognition of same-sex rights, which led Parliament finally to adopt the Same-Sex Marriage Act. But there were many, many important legal developments during my time on the bench, and I talk about those.
It's both a book that you would be interested to read just because she's a fascinating historical figure, but it will also probably be of interest to students who study law, who want to know more about the cases, but about who the judges were and how they viewed those cases.
I tried to convey the world I was living in at that particular time and how it felt to me in as honest a way as possible, and let the chips fall where they may. I wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. People could see that in the book.
It's vitally important in 2020 that we understand the reason the Supreme Court is set up the way it is and what its role is. And I think that this book, by lifting a little bit of the veil of secrecy around the Supreme Court, by shining some light in some of the mysterious corners of the Supreme Court, is a gift to Canada. Because if we don't understand who our Supreme Court is and what our Supreme Court is, we're never going to understand why our Supreme Court is.
Roach's book is just the litany of examples of the way in which the system fails and how it contributes to aggravate the plight of Indigenous peoples in the justice system, but also how justice doesn't get done.
Kate Roach's book is really an autopsy of a murder trial. It takes apart one of the most controversial trials in Western Canadian history, the trial of Gerald Stanley for the murder of Colton Bushy. So it's not like a Perry Mason procedural, it's more an academic analysis of a court case that gripped the nation.
By tracing a case from the start through to the final verdict was something that was new for me, but it also convinced me that sometimes truth emerges more from a single case than from a kind of more macro sociological conclusion. And so I think I'm going to continue to work in that vein.
And this book allows you to step back from the human story and to look at the legal apparatus that led to the conclusion that we've got to.
You want to know what systemic racism looks like? This book will paint you the exact picture of what it looks like, and also hopefully compel those in positions of power who can do something about it to think about their actions and their role in contributing to a system like this.
Now, there was one important voice missing in that video. On July 1st of this year, Shaughnessy Cohen jury member and past finalist Greg Donaghy died after suffering a heart attack. He was a passionate champion for Canadian political writing and for this event. He will be greatly missed.
Greg was first and foremost an historian and a Canadian historian. I mean, somebody who really understood the modern 20th century history of Canada. And it was such a gift to have him on our jury.
He could easily spot historical inaccuracies in some of the books that we read. And so that was really useful, especially for topics that neither Paula or I were expert in.
Not only did he bring a depth of wisdom, he was frankly the peacemaker on the jury when Althea and I, there were a lot of books, and Althea and I had a lot of opinions, and it was often Greg who was able to cut through when she and I were engaged in some pretty passionate debate and say, okay.
I think he was looking for a book that would be historically significant, that would help shape our understanding of the country, that was above all factually accurate, and that did what it set out to do well, whether or not it did what you expected it to do.
He brought to the panel a breadth of knowledge and a breadth of understanding about what makes for good academic history and what makes for good writing that were a real gift to the jury process.
Now, the time has come to unveil the difficult choice that Greg, Paula, and Althea have made to announce the winner of the 2020 Shaughnessy Cohen Prize and to virtually present a check for $25,000. Please welcome Fiona Murray, the Vice President of Public and Government Affairs at CN.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fiona Murray, Vice President, Public and Government Affairs at CN. J'aimerais féliciter nos 5 finalistes de ce soir pour nous avoir donné des livres qui exigent une certaine réflexion. On behalf of CN, it is my honor to congratulate all 5 of tonight's finalists and to announce this year's winner of the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing. For more than a century, CN has been essential in connecting communities across the country. We are grateful for the people that have helped make us North America's railroad and have inspired us, as tonight's finalists do, to contribute to social and environmental advancement through our public action and programs. We look forward to continuing our journey of bringing Canadians together. Tonight's event is another step in that goal. 2020 also marks our 3rd year sponsoring the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize. It has been a challenging year for many of us, and we're proud to continue highlighting talented writers like tonight's nominees, whose works also connect Canadians, this time in valuable political and literary conversation and debate. And now the winner of this year's Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing is Beverly McLaughlin for Truth Be Told, My Journey Through Life and the Law, published by Simon & Schuster. Félicitations, Beverly. Congratulations.
Wow, and thank you.
I'm pleased, honored, and very moved. Bonsoir, tout le monde. Good evening. I'm absolutely thrilled, I must say, to learn that I have been chosen as the winner of the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize for Political Writing. It's a great honor and one that means a lot to me in particular because I remember Shaughnessy Cohen. I met her when I first came to Ottawa in 1989 and shared some lovely evenings with her. She was a wonderful person who cared deeply about Canada and its governance. And I think she'd be pleased to know that the winner of this year's book was chosen because it was a book about the third branch of governance, the Canadian judiciary, which I have been associated with all my life, or a good part of it. I wrote this memoir from the heart. It's my story through good times and more challenging times. And it's also a story about my country, Canada, a country where a young girl of no particular note could rise to become the Chief Justice of Canada. Thank you so much for honoring my story with this prize. When I retired from the Supreme Court of Canada, I had no intention of writing this book. Someone had told me when they were asked, they thought about it and concluded that, and I quote, living it once was enough. And that had been my opinion until I was persuaded by others that I really should tell my story because it was in many ways a different story and an extraordinary story. I'm grateful to those who persuaded me to embark on this voyage of recollection, rediscovery, and coming home. Writing this book has brought me close to Canadians and the wonder of our national diversity. This prize is the icing on the amazing cake that has been my life. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Your Honor, or I guess because you're retired, I can now officially call you Beverly. Well done. And thank you again to all of our supporters. Thank you to all the members of the Volunteer Organizing Committee. And thank you for tuning in to our virtual Politics in the Pen. My name is Tom Clark, and we'll see you all, fingers crossed, in person in 2021.